Hey, everybody, and welcome to Common Good Conversations, a podcast working to create deeper narratives at the intersection of faith and politics and social issues for the common good in West Michigan. My name is Nick Brock, and I'm the executive director for Vote Common Good West Michigan. And co hosting the program with me is Shawn Skinner.
How we doing this
Shawn,
morning?
how are you this morning?
Doing okay. Doing okay.
Doing all right. You're running behind, but you're here. You made it.
Yep.
Why
Technical
are you running
difficulties.
behind?
Oh, just the sun didn't come up fast enough apparently, and this was not the time that I thought it was. It was the weekend, and we turned off all the alarms in the house for some odd reason,
Oh, I hate it when that
including
happens.
the
Well,
kids. They actually slept in, and that
it's
never
just
happens.
oh yeah, two little kids sleeping in. It's called time management, though. It's called being an adult.
Yes, I know. I know. Every
That's
single person in the house is still asleep.
that's all
And that's
right. That's all
unheard
right.
of.
Hey,
So
Shawn.
my
So today,
apologies.
oh yeah, apology accepted. Shawn, today we have the privilege of being in conversation with Greg Jaffe. Did I say that correct?
Yep, you got it.
Jaffe.
That's it.
All right. Thank you, Greg. So, Greg Jaffe, a national reporter from the Washington Post. Now, Greg has made a handful of trips to Ottawa County since fall of 2022, with his first story about Ottawa County published a year ago today, if I have that correct. So, Greg's documented the ways a tumultuous moment for the nation's politics and the Republican Party have shaken up this fast growing and right leaning county of about 300,000 people. Greg, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
You got it. So, Greg, I want to talk a bit. We're going to talk at length about Ottawa County and the people of Ottawa County. And what I want to start out first with is this tumultuous moment. Um, what has been that tumultuous moment for you that has shaken up the county, seeing that you've visited the county for the past year and written 4 articles up to this point about the county. What is that tumultuous moment for you?
I think it's one of the things that's really interesting about Ottawa County is that so many of the things that are shaking up American politics are sort of playing out there. Um, um, Fights over sort of gender and identity and sexuality, fights over religion and its role in politics, fights over the aftermath of COVID. It's all sort of happening there. And I think the moment that kicks it off is you have this group called Ottawa Impact, um, which represents probably a wing of the Republican Party, which largely takes power in Ottawa County, and that really shakes up the county in a way that I think a lot of people didn't see coming.
Yeah. Now, how did this story get on your radar? There are just a lot of places throughout the states who may be facing similar things. It, is what happening in is what's happening in Ottawa County like the most um, newsworthy story out of all the rest? Are we at the top tier here?
Yeah, so part of the reason it came onto my radar accidentally, um, last year around this time, my bosses wanted a story on a county clerk running an election, and the pressures that county clerks felt. And so I just like looked all over the country and I was searching for a county clerk who I thought would be good. Um, and I thought I wanted to write about a Republican county clerk, who believed in the election system but had voters who sort of disagreed with him or had doubts or skepticism about it. And so I called around. I probably talked to like 5 or 6 on the phone, and then ran into Justin Roebuck, the Ottawa County Clerk, who had some events going on prior to the election, trying to convince people of the election's fairness and that it was on the up and up. And I thought, oh, this should just be a good guy to spend a couple of days with. So I came out to do that, and that led me to Ottawa County. And part of what I find interesting about Ottawa County that makes it a little bit unique is it's a pretty large place. It's a prosperous place, so it's not a lot of counties that are sort of taken over by um, far these more far right movements are not tend to be kind of smaller and more rural. Ottawa County is not that. The other thing that I think makes Ottawa County really interesting is that it's relatively diverse. So, it's got people across the political spectrum, all of whom are engaged. And so you see a lot of voices there. It's not just all kind of, in a lot of these counties where these movements have taken over, they tend to be kind of pretty uniform in their politics. But Ottawa County is a pretty diverse place.
Yeah. So speak to that point a little bit about its relative diversity. I would say that the characteristics of the county tend to be white, conservative, meaning in their political views, historically voting Republican, and then the within the faith realm, the majority of folks would consider themselves Christian. So in your meeting with a lot of these people and doing your stories, that has not I don't know held true for you, or you're finding that there are just more people who diverge from that characterization.
Yeah, I think what you sketched out is largely right. I mean, that's not incorrect. But I guess what I've seen is that in some ways Ottawa County looks a little bit like the country. You have a coastline in Holland and Grand Haven, and while I wouldn't call those cities liberal or um, racially diverse, they are kind of ideologically diverse. They tend to be a little bit more liberal than as you move towards the center of the county and as you move towards east towards Grand Rapids. So you have kind of a little bit of a liberal coastline and
Hmm.
a more conservative interior. I will say with regard to like gender, I do think that there's been a lot of change in Ottawa County over the last 10 years. People will sometimes ask me, oh, is Ottawa County with regard to um, gender and LGBTQ issues, is it moving forward or back? And maybe forward and back aren't the right terms, but just for lack of a better term, I'll use those. And I'd like to say it's moving. It's moving in both directions simultaneously. I think on the coastline, you're likely to see a lot more pride flags. There are pride groups. Hope College has an LGBTQ group on campus, um, and so along the coastline, you see a group that's becoming much more accepting of LGBTQ people. And then as you move interior, I think there's been a little bit of a backlash among folks. And so, people ask me, is it a place that's moving forward or backward? And it's moving forward and backward simultaneously in the same place. And I think that creates some interesting tensions to write about.
Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that tension. And my opinion is that tension drives from people's long-standing voting patterns, which, according to the county, has been Republican, and
Mm-hmm.
also conservative Christian values. Um, so when it comes to like this faith and politics in Ottawa County, what have you observed, and what stands out for you the most? How do the two inform each other? Does one inform the other, and vice versa, more so than the other?
Yeah, I'm still struggling to figure out the role that the churches have played in the politics. I think one thing that I've noticed is that churches seem to have changed. You see, I think we've seen a big growth in sort of non-denominational evangelical churches, particularly as you um, towards the move east towards Grand Rapids. The old kind of Christian Reformed and Dutch Reformed churches that I think dominated Christianity in Ottawa County they're not on the wane, but I think these big evangelical church, non-denominational evangelical churches have grown really fast. And I've gone to services at a couple of them, and I find them really fascinating. They tend to be very conservative, but they also tend to be relatively diverse. Um, it's young and old. You see a large number of Hispanics. You see there aren't a lot of African Americans or in Ottawa County, but you see a few Black people there. And so they're big, diverse, very vibrant places, also very, very conservative. And so I think part of Ottawa impact, gets its fuel coming out of these big denominational evangelical churches, which strike me as a somewhat new phenomenon in Ottawa County.
Yeah, so this fuel for auto impact, and have you seen this perhaps nationally too? You mentioned that this might be more new for the county with these mega churches, if you will, with these non-denominational structures and it influencing Ottawa impact, commissioners or those who support them. Is that something too that you may notice or recognize nationally, and it's kind of trickling down here, or are we kind of like the a small epicenter and then it's going upward? How would you describe what's happening?
Yeah, no, I think it's very much of a national trend. You're seeing it all over the country. The rise of these churches, and it's happening in Texas and California and big states. It's happening in blue states and red states. I think people are particularly coming out of the pandemic too, might be searching for kind of communion and meaning and things like that. And I think one thing these churches do really effectively is provide sort of a big, welcoming environment that extends just beyond sort of traditional Christianity and liturgy, and provides, a lot of ways for people to sort of access them. So, not just Sunday services, but all sorts of support groups, financial support groups, and you know, um, uh, groups for people with activities for people with kids, older people, younger people. They just provide they they're really effective and really good at providing people a lot of ways in to their communities, I think.
Yeah,
And a lot
you
of
know,
services. They're beautiful churches with, lots of coffee shops and all sorts of things that people can do when they get there.
yeah. I think I know what church you're talking about, with a coffee shop inside with a full on barista, making machines, and that's kind of my nerd world.
I
Shawn,
need to go there.
yeah, I wonder if we could take a little aside here, a small little tangent. Because Greg, you brought up this, how much these mega churches or just these larger places for people within the community to reconnect with each other, especially coming out of the pandemic. So just a little bit of context here. So I grew up in the church, my entire life. I've attended a local church for the last 20 years, but then decided about 2 years ago to stop going to that church. And now, Shawn, you and your family have recently decided to start attending a church after not really doing so much beforehand. So we are
Yeah.
doing the inverse here. Shawn, do you have any like thoughts or input on what Greg is saying? Like, this is kind of a going back to a church or finding a church coming out of the pandemic is a place for finding community and then getting connected with folks.
Well, when you're during the pandemic and everything, everybody was so stuck in their own houses and everything. I think a lot of them are looking to get some sort of community when they came out. Um, that's not the reason we did. We ended up going back to church. We, had friends that went to this particular church, and they eventually wore us down to come on, join us, come on, join us. As some people will do. Um, but it's a pretty conservative church. Um, I would s- I was never raised in the church. Um, I was kind of raised around it. My grandmother played organ in churches all while I grew up, but I never really attended or anything. So I'm still in my spiritual journey a little bit on all of that, and so I haven't been to too many different churches to kind of compare. I have been to a couple and stuff like that. Unfortunately, we have to bring our own coffee to the church I currently attend. Um, so we get stuck with
Unfortunately, yeah.
Starbucks. We don't get nothing fancy. Um, so, but the kids like it, and so that's a big plus. And I don't think it's harmful for them to learn about uh religion and everything. I do kind of want to take it back a little bit. Earlier you were talking about Ottawa County starting to be a little bit more accepting of the LGBTQ plus and everything. I'm kind of curious, what do you mean by accepting? What was it like previously before they were accepting and now they're accepting, type of thing? Like, where's the difference happening there?
My sense is talking to folks, and I'm not the expert, but talking to the folks that out on the lake shore and things like that, that there weren't pride festivals and things like that in Ottawa County 20 years ago, and now they've become somewhat regular events. There weren't groups like out on the lake shore 20 years ago. Um, you walk down Main Street in Holland or Grand Haven in June, and you see a lot of pride flags. And so that I think there's an acceptance that not only, I mean, maybe even acceptance isn't really even the right word, but an embrace in those places that these people are part of our community and we want them to be part of our community. And I think that's different.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Greg, you did an article really that the Pride festivals was a big part of that article. So the article was called "A Sex Educator in Michigan Refused to Be Shamed, Then Came the Backlash," and I'll read the subtitle here. So Heather Alberta, who was the county employee for the health department, found that her calling was by speaking bluntly about sex in her conservative county. Her career was no match, though, for the nation's culture wars. And in this article, in this story, you go on to talk about how the Ottawa Impact Commissioners, they put forth this resolution about protecting child innocence, and a lot of it had strong and negative language about the LGBT plus community, and referencing pride festivals and drag shows, um, and out of this coming people talking about Heather Alberta as a groomer in the community, like these people like her or kind of like-minded folks, they are grooming kids in deviant behaviors. What
Allegedly.
No, that's what these individuals are saying from Ottawa Impact and those who
Yeah,
support them, that
that's what you're
they
saying, but that's not particularly what the individuals are doing. They're not actually grooming. Yeah,
correct.
they're
It's this.
allegedly grooming.
Yeah, it's this view and perception of what's happening. So with
Mhm.
that, in that article, how have people in the county reacted to that? I know it's this kind of wanting to move forward and then go back again. Do you have any further thoughts on that, and on how the Ottawa Impact Commissioners are leading the charge against this community in that work?
Yeah, I think part of what's going on there, and I've thought a fair amount about this as to what's happening and why it's happening. I think that is a little bit of a backlash that happens that, when you see pride festivals in Chicago or Detroit, it feels far away. And I think when folks come and they see a pride festival in Holland or Grand Haven, that provokes a little bit of a backlash in them. Not that it should, but that it does. That it was fine when these things were happening in Chicago, but now they're happening in our city. And I think it's also worth remembering that, how quickly things have changed. It wasn't that long ago that Barack Obama was against gay marriage. And now, gay marriage is sort of, I think, broadly accepted across the United States in most places. And so I do think that provokes a backlash when things change that quickly. It freaks people out a little bit. And one thing I've noticed in Ottawa County that I didn't cover in the stories, but I just find like phenomenal. I can't tell you the number of people in Ottawa County, on the right particularly, who brought up this paranoia about furries. These are people who,
Oh yeah.
dress up supposedly and use litter boxes, and that there are furry students who are furries who are tolerated in Ottawa County schools. Now, it's complete nonsense and they don't exist, but I had 4 or 5 people discuss, raise this with me as a real thing. And so, part of me is wondering, like, well, where is this coming from? And I think it's just coming from this fear and paranoia that the place in which I live is changing in ways I don't understand. And it leads people to, I think, embrace conspiracies and believe things that just patently are not true.
Yeah, Greg, how do you take on something like that when people talk to you about, well, okay, there's these children at X school, and they're going to school dressed up as this animal, and they're going to the bathroom in litter boxes, and they're adamantly saying like this is happening. How do
Mhm.
you react to that? Do you say, no, I'm sorry, I don't believe that's happening because of this? Or then, or do you do some follow up work with that? Okay, I'll listen to this person and try to track that story down, and then put it in my, news story. How does that work for you when you are confronted with these kind of outlandish theories and examples?
Yeah, yeah. Well, first I'll ask, well, so why do you think that? Where did you hear that? Who told you that? What school is that? You try and get some facts from folks that you can follow up on something hard. Um, and usually they don't exist. It's like, well, somebody told me or a teacher told me, but it wasn't her class, it was somebody else's class. And maybe it wasn't her school, it was another school. Um, but I think as you pull the thread, you find that, well, no, there actually wasn't anything there. But again, it comes up again and again. And I think exactly where it starts somewhere out there on the internet in the ether. But I think it's a big thing when you have somebody like Sylvia Rhodey, who's the vice chair of the county commission, talking about it in meetings, is that county commission meetings, as though it actually exists. That's, I think, gives real fuel to these things. You have an elected official who holds a position of some importance who's discussing it publicly. To a lot of people, that feels like evidence. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So I want to pull on this thread a little bit more. You mentioning there, people bringing stories or examples to you and saying, well, there really isn't anything there. So let's go back a year. So Greg, I think I have this right. As you today would be 1 year from when you published your first article about Ottawa County with Justin Roebuck, called "In a County Rife with Conspiracy Theories, a GOP Clerk Fights to Win Voters' Trust." And the subtitle is "Justin Roebuck Sought to Rebuild Faith in the Election System with a Public Forum. At the same time, the Ottawa County Patriots were raising doubts." And just as an aside here, for context, the Ottawa County Patriots is a 501c4 nonprofit organization, aligned with Ottawa Impact's goals and initiatives. What I found really interesting in that article, though, is, again, a year ago, Justin had mentioned to you that um, that the, that what was going on in the county, people bringing to him their stories about how they thought the 2020 election was wrought with fraud. That people had watched the documentary 2000 Mules, and they were bringing these allegations and these stories about, okay, people are dumping hundreds of ballots at these ballot boxes. What do we do about that? So on and so forth. And Justin providing, forthright answers and being patient and civil with these people as they kind of go back and forth. But what was really interesting to me was that, when people are not willing to listen to their county clerk, a Republican, a longtime Republican who's worked with, trusted people in those circles within Michigan for a long time. He goes that, we're entering into dangerous territory. So what do you make of Justin's assessment from the political rhetoric and actions being bought and sold in Ottawa County? Was he a predictor of this? Did he foresee the future based upon, the conversations of the 2020 election?
Yeah, I think Justin's a pretty savvy political operator. The one thing I think Justin does exceptionally well, is he takes people seriously even when their claims are not always serious. And he tries to hear not just what they're worried about in specifics, which may be factually incorrect, but understanding that, well, if they lack faith in the election system, that's a problem. Even if their faith is not grounded in fact, it's still a problem for me. And so I think at times tries to meet them halfway or more than halfway. I'll give you an example of something that Justin's done that I think reflects this. People became very concerned that voting machines are briefly hooked up to the internet to transmit data after the election. And so any notion that a voting machine would be, hooked to the internet to send encrypted election information became a concern. So Justin, I think, believed that system was safe. That system is safe and effective. But because he heard this concern, he created a system where the voting machines in Ottawa County now are not ever connected to the internet. They transmit voting results, the tabulators do, via USB drives. And so he created a whole system with USB drives and GPS trackers so people can move election results on election day. They can transmit them via this way without ever connecting to the internet. Now, was this necessary? Probably not. But I think he understands that, well, even if it's not as necessary, if I can do it and it's going to bolster trust and knock down one of these talking points, then it's worth my doing it. And so I think he's been very savvy in terms of listening to people compassionately, taking them seriously, even when some of their claims were not serious.
Well, anything having to do with the internet scares the heck out of me. I don't trust anything on the internet, really.
Yeah.
You hear so many things about, identity theft and, Russia's, screwing with this, or, China and hacking and ransoms and yeah.
Yeah, no, it's not an unreasonable position to take. Yeah. And I think that's why Justin's smart. He's like, I know the system is working, but yeah, I'll take what these people are. I understand why these people feel the way they feel, and I'm going to address it.
Yeah, it's I'll piggyback here in support of Justin. So after the 2020 election, he put out this report on his county, the work that was done with voters, and it was called Verify the Report. And essentially what he put in the report is, the numbers and the data to verify how the election, at least for Ottawa County, was absolutely safe and secure, with the numbers just through the roof, like a 99 point whatever, for its safety and security, with specific errors becoming related to just a clerical error, or somebody not doing the making an error, going from this place to that. So Justin has worked to build this trust with the election process in Ottawa County.
Sometimes I feel like he's bailing out a leaking boat, though, too, because he can make an argument like you just said, and people will say, well, what about Detroit, or what about Arizona, and he can't account for every county and municipality across the country, all of which use largely the same systems that he does and the same measures that he does. But so it is a little bit of like he's fighting out. He's bailing out a leaking boat. It's a nonstop fight.
Yeah. So I want to take Justin Roebuck as a good example of building trust within the community. Again, a longtime Republican elected official, and contrast that with the elected officials for Ottawa Impact and the Ottawa County Commissioners. Again, based upon the stories that you've written, and I'll just be quite frank here that the quotes and the comments given, or that you placed in the story from county employees, or they just have this big sense of distrust from those commissioners, and really it driving from a lack of communication. So the commissioners have an agenda. They ran on specific items, and they are implementing these things. but they have not taken into account the foresight to communicate with department heads. We're talking about the health department, specifically. How what have you seen in the community from this trust standpoint? Is Ottawa Impact building trust within the community, or are they only building it within their own base? How are they working or not working to build upon that?
Well, I think they are building trust among people who felt like that they were locked out of the system, people who felt like that the system was corrupt or not working for them or ignoring their concerns. So now those people feel like they have a voice in the county government and the way that it's run. I do feel like that they're very mistrustful of the county government that they do run. They're very worried about sort of outside forces that they see trying to infiltrate the county through the county government and sort of undermine what they see as their conservative place. Joe Moss's the county chair will often say, defend your piece of America. I think that's their view, that their way of life, that their beliefs are under assault, and that one of the primary means in which they're being assaulted is via county government. Outside groups giving money or starting programs or working in conjunction with county professionals to sort of undermine their beliefs. I don't think that that's true. I think it's largely untrue, but it's what they see. And it's an interesting position that in some ways reflects what we're seeing nationally, is that you have a Republican Party or Republicans in this case that are running government that mistrust the government that they're running. And so there's an effort to sort of purge it of non-believers, I think, at times.
Yeah, let's talk about this. These outside groups. So Ottawa Impact, again, they have a big axe to grind about outside groups writing about what's happening in Ottawa County, and even just internally, they have a bit of anger and distrust pointed at the Holland Sentinel, led by Sarah Leach. And so obviously, you work for the Washington Post, based out of Washington, a national news organization. And this is, a conversation that Shawn and I have had just a bit over the podcast here, but, personally as well, is, how can people trust news organizations nowadays? There's the fake news or the liberal media, and the bias that it tends to have one way or the other. How would you, Greg, just as a journalist, how would you persuade or try to convince folks about trusting, your work or similar news organizations?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say, I think the one thing, the thing that news organizations like the Holland Sentinel and the Washington Post have in common is that we all have a code of ethics that we try to follow, with regard to making sure quotes are accurate, making sure facts are accurate, things of that nature. We're professional journalists and try and conduct ourselves in that way. It's difficult. Ottawa County is a difficult reporting environment. It's really hard on Sarah. I found it challenging, is that the Ottawa Impact commissioners, will not speak with us for the most part. And so when you're telling a story and one side will not engage with you and will not talk to you, will not explain what they're thinking and why they're thinking, it makes it challenging. It makes it really hard. And I try really hard in these stories not to judge them. My job isn't always just, in some cases it is the fact check. So like, okay, furries don't exist. And I think we need to, say that, we can find no evidence of something like this. But it's also my main role, I feel like, is to try to understand what's driving their grievances, what's driving them to be angry. What's driving this sense of mistrust. And so, to the extent that I can understand and explain that, I'm doing something that I hope is worthwhile. And understanding at times that these grievances aren't coming out of nowhere, that in some cases the grievances are, these feelings and this mistrust are rooted in legitimate, understandable grievances.
Yeah, we've talked to Sarah Leach from the Holland Sentinel in a podcast a few weeks ago, and she's made the point where, and she puts it in her articles too, that she reached out to Joe Moss or ex-commissioner to get their comment, but there's never a response. She said, at some point you just have to kind of throw your hands up and say, all right, I've tried, and recognize that they won't, respond. For you, how does that work for you? At what point, do you say, or at what point do you throw your hands up and you go, okay, I've done all I can to try to reach out to the other side, to have them participate in the process, but they are unwilling partners. What at what point, or do you keep continuing on?
Well, I think you keep continuing on, but in different ways. You have to keep trying. I don't think Joe Moss or Sylvia Rhodey are likely ever to talk to me or Sarah, so I understand Sarah's frustration with that. But there are other ways around it too, to try to understand where they're coming from and what's driving this movement, and understand who they are and to what extent they have legitimate grievances. And so part of that is just figuring out, is listening to them really carefully at county commissioning meetings. What are they saying? They do speak publicly there, and so you have access to hear that. Trying to understand the communities in which they're coming from, talking to people around them. The last story we did on Allison Miedema, I wanted to understand why this person felt the way she did, what was driving her sort of anger, and to a certain extent, what had led her to become sort of radicalized. I'm not sure that's the right word, during COVID. And so for me, that became figuring out, well, what can I do to understand what's happened in this person's life in the last 3 years that led them to politics and led them to Ottawa Impact and led them to have the beliefs that they do. And so it's talking to as many people as around her who will talk to me, and that's her family members to the extent that they'll talk to me. It's understanding and attending the churches that they go to. So Patrick Marley, my colleague, has been to Joe Moss's church and sat in the pews and listened to, well, what's he hearing every Sunday from his pastor, and how's that shaping his views? I attended church with Rebecca Curran, who's not an Ottawa Impact commissioner, but I think agrees with them probably 95% of the time. And Rebecca's great. She's very willing to engage and talk. But just also understanding, and I think she goes to the same church as Cal Terpstra, sitting in the pews with them and hearing, well, what are they hearing every Sunday? So maybe you can't do an interview with them, but there are other ways to try to understand where they're coming from, and trying to be as creative as I can in understanding, well, who are these people? And they're not nobody wakes up every morning and thinks, I want to destroy my hometown, I want to destroy my community, I want to destroy my country. People wake up and think, I want to do something good for my country. And so what is it that they're hearing that makes them think that I am doing the right thing?
Yeah. There's to that point, I was just thinking about last night as I was prepping for this interview and reading your articles, and one thing that stuck out to me most, and I've read it before, and what Sarah Leach has written, is that the big reason, if not the reason, for Ottawa Impact was a response out of COVID and the shutdowns that the health department placed on schools, and specifically Libertas Christian School, where Joe Moss and his family, they hold leadership positions, and then his family, I believe daughter or daughters, go. And so, but what stuck out to me most was that Joe Moss personally felt personally threatened by the health department. So when the health department warned that school to shut down. When they did not heed those warnings, they had to physically um, place, like a placard or a sign on the door saying you are shut down. And if this is correct, they chained the door shut.
Yeah.
And at the time too, there were, hey, if you don't abide by these rules, there are fines of X amount of dollars, or imprisonment. So I keep coming back to this point of
Feels like
where Joe
feels a bit
Moss.
extreme.
What's that?
So that feels a bit extreme to lock the doors and everything, in my view.
Well, so
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
where
I
this.
think it's not unreasonable, right? Yeah, you can see why you feel like really under attack when something like that happens. And
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, and so that's what I'm trying to always remember that, um, trying to find the reasonableness, or kind of the starting point for how this all started, is Joe Moss and his family felt personally threatened. So I try to ask myself, all right, whatever the situation is or was, if I felt personally threatened, if I felt like, some government was, threatening to send me to jail, how would I respond? And so I try to move into these conversations, particularly about Ottawa Impact, with that in mind, because it can be easy to just demonize what they're doing. And I think there's a lot of places to accurately do that, but to be more humble and compassionate about these conversations, which I
yeah,
think
yeah.
we're doing.
And I think you need to be humble and compassionate to both sides too. Where I fault Joe and others is that, the health department's making difficult decisions with limited information. There was an outbreak at his school that they had asked folks to mask, which isn't a huge request. That this health department was getting complaints from inside the school that, hey, there's a pandemic and these folks are not taking it seriously. And so, I understand we're in the early days of a pandemic that we don't know what it is. And so, you know, the health department was not behaving irrationally either.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. To be clear, they were acting within the scope of the law and what's mandated by the state of Michigan for the health department, and then what was required by the Ottawa County Health Department. So, and that was proven in a court of law. Just a final comment on this, because we don't have to talk about this all day, is that they were, a lawsuit was filed against the commissioners, I believe, or was it the health department, that they wanted to fire, that they thought the commissioners should fire the health director, but that they couldn't do that at the time. And then this is the ongoing debate right now, that the commissioners are struggling with the current health director, Adeline Hambley. Oh boy. Let's land this plane here, as I like to say here, Greg. Let's land it here on news and how to receive or find our news. We talked about it a little bit. What How should people best discern where to receive their information? There's information around 24/7, 365. What advice would you give to readers as they scroll through their news feeds, and trying to figure out, okay, this is worthy, this is not, etc.?
I mean, I think a big part, and this is a shout out to Sarah Leach, are the people who are writing, do they live in your community? Are they attending the meetings? Are they going there in person? Are they talking to people? Or are they sitting at home expounding on stuff and saying that they're doing their own research? I give Sarah and her reporters credit that they're at all those county commission meetings, that they're talking to people before and after them, that they live in your community and you can see them there. I mean, that should go a long way to saying, well, this is a trustworthy source. Hopefully in the Washington Post, we're not writing about Ottawa County from Washington. I've made, at this point, 8 or 9 trips to Ottawa County. I'm there a lot. I go to a lot of meetings. I drive. They know me at the Residence Inn pretty well at this point. I drive around and talk to a lot of people, and I think it's that on the ground reporting. It's really trying to understand that, well, that tells me that this person is probably a trustworthy source. Um, uh, to me, that's the biggest thing. Don't trust people who you don't know where their reporting is coming from or where their data is coming from. Who've never lived in your community, who've never spoken with anyone in your community, who you've never, seen.
Yeah. So with your 8 or 9 trips already in the bag, and I'm sure a handful more to come, what are your favorite places to eat, or do you have like where's your
Yeah.
go-to coffee shop? I know that you got to be at some coffee shop banging away on the keys, or a place to grab a local beer for which West Michigan is known for. You got any favorites or go-to spots?
Yeah, yeah. I like grabbing dinner in downtown Holland. There are a bunch of really great restaurants there. Oh, and I'm trying to remember. There's a coffee shop that I really love. You might know it. It's only opens on like Saturdays and Sundays. It's over kind of like a mile from the Residence Inn, in like a little warehouse where the guy roasts his own beans and then sells them, and then has his coffee shop open. I think it's Friday, Saturday, Sunday mornings.
Yeah,
It's
I
excellent.
think Stovetop. Is that the
That's
one?
it. Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah,
really enjoy that place.
yeah, they do a good job. Little shout out for Stovetop if they listen. All right, Greg, we
Your
appreciate
sponsor.
your time this morning, and your insight into Ottawa County and the people and the politics. We appreciate you coming into the county, giving your time, and then we look forward to the stories, as we move forward. So, thanks again, Greg.
Cool.
Great
Thanks
meeting
for
you,
having
Greg.
me. Yeah.
You got it. Shawn, you know what I'm gonna say.
What? What?
What's your take? What's your takeaways?
Greg's still here.
I'll hang up. Nice. Thanks, you guys. I really
Yeah,
appreciate it.
I should have told you. You could click out of the button and you'll be good.
I'll do it. I just wanted to say goodbye.
He's still
Thanks for
staring at
having
me.
me. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
Yep.
No, there was one. I knew we were running out of time, so I didn't bring up the question. But I was kind of wondering because we were talking about Ottawa County not partaking in interviews and stuff like that, and I was kind of thinking in my head like, I wonder. Same thing with Trump a little bit too. Not to get out of the local, but I was kind of wondering like, I wonder if the Republican party's kind of taking some notes from Biden a little bit from the 2020 election where he hid in the basement a lot of the time. Kind of, and now Trump's not doing any of the debates and stuff like that. Kind of going, well, if we don't do anything with the other side, they won't catch us on a something or something or something. Because I felt like during 2020 Biden did a lot of not doing anything really, and I do think that helped him in the election a bit. Because honestly, Trump probably would have ripped him apart a little if he had multiple debates, just because that's what Trump does.
Yeah, so you're wondering that it's more of a defensive strategy, so they don't have to answer for their whatever they're doing.
Yep. If this worked for Biden, why can't we just stay hidden and isolated and just do our thing and see, nobody can challenge us if they aren't there to ask the question to us, person face to face type thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think there is something to that. They have to be more accountable, and talking about Ottawa Impact, they have to be more accountable to news organizations or people that they would say that they don't trust for X amount of reasons.
Yeah.
So they've taken to their own media and put out their own things where they can talk about things in an insular way or not have a critique or a hard question asked of them.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So my
Which that kind
takeaway
of feels like a Biden playbook too a little bit.
No, I
When was the last time we
disagree.
saw him take a hard question?
Well, he has press conferences. I will say that he has press conferences,
That's not
and
a hard question. Someone hand him a piece of paper, go out there and try to get through this whole thing without looking like a mess.
Well, I'm not following everything that President Biden does right now, so I don't know. I'm not up on his press conferences and the questions that he's asking or responding to or not responding to. But what I do know is that we got to get out of here. So we've got we got to get into this other interview. So let me get us out here by saying that boy, we will be dropping this episode in a few weeks, but you can listen to other episodes to the Common Good Conversation on Spotify, iTunes, and on our Buzzsprout feed. So you can find these things on our Facebook page and then on our website. So Vote Common Good West Michigan, and you'll be able to find our podcast, or Vote Common Good West Michigan primary Facebook.
There you go.
All right, Shawn, let's get out of here and get ready for the next.
Awesome. Talk to you guys later.
All right, see y'all.